All right, everybody, welcome back to my TV program. I am Brian Lee Durfee, author of The Forgetting Moon and The Blackest Heart, both books published by Simon & Schuster's Saga Press. Today I'm going to be reviewing Brad Thor's newest novel, Rising Tiger. This is book number 21, I think, in his Scott Harvath thriller series. Might be book number 20, might be book number 22, somewhere in there. Anyway, let's check out the cover. You know, I always review the covers first because I love graphic design and book cover illustration. So let's take a look at this. I mean, it just screams out massive international thriller. You know, we've got the big Brad Thor font, the Rising Tiger with the silhouette of the tiger, the bright red. I mean, it jumps off the page, it jumps off the shelf. I think these Emily Bestler books always does a great job with all of their thriller titles. I've got every Brad Thor book over here in my collection, so I'll just show you that shelf right there. And not only that, but I also have, get this on there straight, I've also got many of them signed because I did meet the fellow a long time ago, back when he lived in Park City, Utah, and used to do book signings in Utah near my home. Anyway, and my other connection to Brad Thor is we also share the same literary agency. My books are represented by the same agency that represents his books. Just a few coinky dinks. Anyway, let's get to this. So, it starts out in, Scott Harvath is our main character. He is, an international spy, assassin, just all around badass. And for 21 books, he's went around saving the world 21 times. Now, so we start in Afghanistan, the botched withdrawal from Afghanistan. The president and our government sort of just screwed that up. It was international news, just embarrassing for everybody and unimaginably tragic. So we start right there with that scenario. Scott Harvath is in the middle of that. He is trying to save a fellow named Topaz and his family because they were, allies of the United States, and that's kind of the setup to the book. I like that Brad Thor brings in a few themes here right off the bat, which is what is it that makes people want to fight for their country, wants to fight for freedom, and what makes people just want to give up. And he talks about if not 100% of the people are on board, it's likely to fail. Like if you've got a country that can change itself and get away from a terrible regime like the Taliban, it usually means everybody in that country needs to be on board. But what happens when people aren't? There's tribalism, there's religious tradition, there's all of these things that get in the way. And Brad Thor makes the comment that, well, if you just don't have everybody on board, it's probably not going to work. And we can see that with Afghanistan. But then it took me back to when I was reading 1776 by David McCullough, and he talked a lot about how in America we were fighting for our freedom back in those days, but in reality, not everybody in America was on board for that back in 1776. There was a lot of people that just were fine living under British rule, and they were upset with the revolutionaries. But yet it still worked out, and maybe that's a different time and era, different weaponry, different political climates, all of that. But we ended up gaining our freedom, But democracy, for whatever reason, Afghanistan didn't want that. They are back under the rule of the Taliban. And that's where we start here with that scenario. And, you know, Scott Harvath, our main guy, is being a badass and kicking ass and taking names. I'll read sort of this. This is one of the most vague jacket copies I've ever read, but I actually like it. I mean, it tells you enough about the story, but really doesn't give you details. So, deadly operative Scott Harvath faces down the country's most powerful enemy. In this book, a white-knuckled thriller, an unprecedented, potentially nation-ending threat has materialized on the world stage. Fearful of the global consequences of engaging this enemy, administration after administration has passed the buck. The clock, however, has run out, and doing nothing is no longer an option. It is time to unleash Scott Harvath. As America's top spy, Harvath has the unparalleled skills and experience necessary to handle any situation. But this assignment feels different. Thrust into a completely unfamiliar culture, with few he can trust, the danger begins mounting the moment he arrives. Amidst multiple competing forces and a host of deadly agendas, it becomes nearly impossible to tell predator from prey. With democracy itself hanging in the balance, Harvath will risk everything to untangle the explosive plot and bring every bad actor to justice. Man, that jacket copy is so vague. You don't know what country they're talking about or what the danger is or any of that. But that's fine, because we get to read in the book. We get to discover as we go. We end up in India. Most of this book takes place in India, and in the back of the book you see that Brad Thor claims he's always had a fascination with India, and he wanted to set a story there. So we jump from Afghanistan to India in this story. And we, the things start to happen. I actually don't want to get any more detailed in this book than what the jacket copy says, because I don't want to give any spoilers. One of the things that I found that in this book that Brad Thor also brings up was that in Russia, due to alcoholism and suicide and drugs, a lot of the men in Russia, they commit suicide. So there's a disproportionate amount of women in Russia to men. Same in China, but for different reasons. In China, we had back in the day, they used to only allow young male Chinese children to be born. They would just, if you've got a female, they would abort them and things like that. And so then in China, you've got a disproportionate of men and not enough women. So at one point, the two countries thought that they would, since Russia has a disproportionate amount of women, maybe the Russians would like to marry our Chinese men, because we've got more men than we can handle. And the Russian women were like, no, we'd rather just share one Russian man. We'd just rather share one Russian man between 10 women than go and be with the Chinese men. And I don't know why that was, but I just thought that was an interesting commentary on how things have how different countries have different problems and how they try to solve them. And that is just a really interesting problem. The fact that China has so many men and not enough women. And that is going to be a problem. I mean, when you've got a lot of dudes with nothing to do, that's a recipe for disaster. And in Russia, it's the opposite. They got a lot of women with no men. But they don't want to, the Russian women were like, no, we're good. I don't know why that stuck out with me. Anyway, one of the reasons I like reading the Brad Thor thrillers is because I enjoy the political commentary. I enjoy learning different things about different countries that I did not know, or at least maybe I knew about it but hadn't really thought about it that much. And I love the explosions and gunfights and action, which we get. This is not, Brad Thor's Scott Harvath isn't the superhero like the Gray Man or Jack Reacher. He's more of a, it's more of a realistic, well, it's still a little fantasy. It's still a little James Bondy, but it's not like over the top. It's sort of between Tom Clancy's Jack Ryan, which is pretty down the middle, and then to the far fantasy of the Jack Reacher and the Gray Man, and then you've got the ultra realistic of John le Carré. I would say that the Brad Thor, Scott Harvath books are nudging a little bit more towards fantasy than Tom Clancy, but not quite so much as the Jack Reachers. Anyway, another good entry into the Brad Thor universe of Scott Harvath. Again, I love these books. I've got them all. I showed you them all. I would give this one a solid 9 out of 10. I myself am not that enamored with the Indian setting. That I typically love the more Eastern European settings. I love the Cold War type settings, the Russias, the Eastern Europeans, the that kind of stuff more so than the India setting. But hey, I learned a lot about different places in like New Delhi and things like that. So it was good book.